Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to today's session, Creation Through Collaboration, where we'll be exploring the AMOSSHE conference theme of connections by looking at the role of networks in developing online training to support universities in tackling harassment. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Kat Rylance, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm Commissioning Editor for Support and Wellbeing at Epigeum, which is part of Oxford University Press. We've got a lot to cover today, and this session has been pre-recorded, but hopefully there'll be time for a few questions at the end where I'll be available live. And I've included my email address on screen, so if not, please feel free to get in touch with any questions at any time at catherine.rylance@oup.com. In terms of the agenda for this session, first of all, I'll start off by giving a brief overview of Epigeum, including our collaborative development approach. We'll then move on to explore how this collaborative approach works in practice by looking at the development of one of our newest programs, Tackling Harassment. And to round off the session, we'll finish up with a Q&A with a couple of our student expert panelists who kindly join me to discuss the issue of harassment in university and wider society, as well as their thoughts on how student co-creation can be a powerful tool in tackling this issue. So who are we and what do we do? Epigeum was founded at Imperial College London in 2005, and it became part of Oxford University Press in 2015. We publish leading online training courses that support the core activities in universities in 4 key areas, and those are research, teaching and development, support and wellbeing, and studying. Our support and wellbeing strand provides the university community with the knowledge and practical skills to promote positive change and healthy behaviours. You can see that we have programmes covering wellbeing, sexual violence prevention and response, and the focus of today's session, which is tackling harassment. Just a quick note to add that if you're interested in finding out more or having a look at any of these programmes in more detail, then you can request a free trial by visiting our website. Now you know who we are, I'd like to spend a little bit of time exploring the Tackling Harassment programme. And as everyone joining this conference is all too aware, the issues of harassment and hate are nothing new. There's been significant work done across the sector to address these issues, and it's worth taking a few moments just to reflect on the work that's been done and the context into which we were publishing this programme. Back in 2016, Universities UK published their seminal Changing the Culture report, and they've been releasing regular updates to that report ever since. The most recent update acknowledged that while significant progress had been made on tackling sexual violence and harassment, the same progress has not been made in addressing broader issues of harassment and hate. At the same time that the UK published their update, the Equality and Human Rights Commission published a key report which shone a spotlight on the issue of racial harassment in particular. And this report included some distressing statistics, highlighting that 1 in 20 students who responded to the survey said racial harassment had caused them to leave their studies. 3 in 20 staff who experienced racial harassment at university said it caused them to leave their jobs, and 8% of students who had experienced racial harassment or hate said it had made them feel suicidal. Most recently, in May, the OFS released their Statement of Expectations for Universities for Preventing and Responding to Harassment, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. They included recommendations to support universities in addressing these issues, and one of those is that higher education providers should implement adequate and effective staff and student training with the purpose of raising awareness of and preventing harassment. While much of this work has been underway for years, it's also worth acknowledging that this past year has thrown the pervasive issues of harassment and hate into sharp relief. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we've seen a spike of incidents of hate both across society and within our university communities. And it is that context that led us to developing the Tackling Harassment programme. It's a comprehensive and interactive online programme designed to support universities in tackling harassment and hate. The programme consists of 2 complementary modules, and each of them are less than an hour in length. It recognises the need to provide primary prevention education in the form of the Being an Active Bystander module to minimise incidents of harassment and hate in the first place, combined with secondary prevention education in the form of the Responding to Disclosures module to ensure that the university community is equipped with the knowledge, skills and confidence both to intervene when it is safe to do so and to provide an effective first response when inevitably disclosures are made. As you can see from this programme overview, we've aimed to be comprehensive in the content coverage with early screens building knowledge around the fundamental concepts and issues, and later screens focusing on confidence and skills development. The programme has been designed to be used flexibly to support and complement your existing in-person initiatives at institutions. And for example, we provide accompanying blended learning material to support workshop delivery alongside the programme. So now you know what the Tackling Harassment programme looks like. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about our collaborative development approach and how we put that into practice with tackling harassment. So at Epigeum, we have two main approaches to programme creation, but both of these have collaboration at their heart. The first approach centres around a development group of universities who provide feedback throughout the process. A key part of this process is the workshop, which is the second bubble along in the diagram, and where our development group members come together to discuss, debate, and delve into content plans. Together, we revise and reimagine those plans ahead of writing to ensure that the programme meets the needs of universities. Members of this group will pay a one-off contribution and they gain a licence to the programme in perpetuity. The content goes through a rigorous review process with substantial input from reviewers, advisors, and development group members, all helping to shape and fine-tune the courses. To give you an idea, a typical course storyboard will go through at least 6 iterations with input from at least 20 individuals before it is approved. And the second approach that we take to development is our straight to license model. You can see that it looks very similar, and this model is just as collaborative. But the main difference is that instead of asking universities to invest upfront to create a development group, we commission an expert panel that comes together to provide advice, guidance, and feedback on the course content, approach, level, and user experience, both before writing begins and at key stages throughout the development process. The review process is similarly rigorous, and again, a typical storyboard will go through many iterations before it is signed off. We tend to adopt the straight to license approach if there's a market need for a programme to be produced quickly, as there was for tackling harassment. It means that we can benefit from the same collaborative approach, but doesn't have an initial upfront cost for universities and is much quicker to produce. So what does that process look like in practice? For tackling harassment, the starting point was the bubble on the left, feedback from the global higher education community. We're fortunate to publish globally, which means we have connections with universities around the world, and that's really helpful when developing a programme like this. It means that we can draw on leading research and best practices from around the world and make sure that they're disseminated more widely. All of our programmes start with a simple question: what are the main challenges universities are facing, and how can we support them to address those challenges? Once we've identified the issue and how we might tackle it, we commission an expert advisor to lead on helping shape the overarching vision for the programme and provide expertise on approach, content coverage, and level. The next step is to find the right person to author the programme. We then consider whether there are any specialist organisations in the area, and if so, how we can involve them in collaboration. This may be as part of the early market research or as part of our expert panel. For tackling harassment, we reached out to non-profit organisations doing great work in this area, and in fact, our author Angie joined us from Stop Hate. Last, but certainly not least, we put together an expert panel to advise on content development. For tackling harassment, it was really important to us to ensure that the panel captured a broad range of perspectives and lived experiences. And something that was also really important to us was that it represented genuine co-creation with students. We've had the benefit of a number of students joining our expert panel, and additionally, many students have shared their lived experiences with us in the form of audio interviews, which you'll see throughout the programme. And with that approach in mind, I wanted to mention the brilliant people from across the sector who have collaborated with us to develop the programme. Dr. Alan Berkowitz is our wonderful expert advisor, an award-winning independent consultant specialising in culture change, gender issues, ending men's violence, and fostering social justice. Alan is an expert in bystander intervention and social norms theory. Angie Wright is Education Development Lead at the charity Stop Hate, and she's written the programme. Angie brings a wealth of experience from delivering in-person training at universities. One of our expert panellists commented that this programme is the product of many different voices coming together from diverse backgrounds, disciplines, and sectors, with the shared goal of increasing understanding of hate and harassment and equipping people with the skills, knowledge, and confidence to stand against it. And I really couldn't put it better myself. You can see that the expert panel benefits from a diverse range of expertise, from academics to student services staff, senior leaders, and students. All of the expert panelists have provided detailed feedback and guidance on the overarching vision, aims, and shape of the programme, and they've also reviewed and advised on the developing materials at every stage of the process. It's been a great source of personal pleasure to work with this group and their expertise. I hope that's provided some food for thought in terms of how, as a higher education community, we can use connections to bring together the best in research and best practice and make it available more widely. But I wanted to devote a chunk of this session to a Q&A with two of our student expert panelists who joined me to discuss the issue of harassment and the opportunities and benefits that co-creation represents. Hello everyone and welcome to our Q&A session. The core value at the heart of developing any Epigeum programme is collaboration, and something that was especially important to me when commissioning the Tackling Harassment programme was that the student voice was really front and centre of what we were doing. So I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by two of our wonderful student expert panellists for Tackling Harassment, Sarah and Mia, and they're joining me for a short Q&A discussing their experiences being involved in this project, the issues of harassment both within the university community and wider society, and the value of co-creation more broadly. So, to get us started, could I ask you to introduce yourselves and give a brief overview of your role in this project? And perhaps we could start with you, Sarah, as I think we've just lost Mia.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, hi everyone who's watching. I'm Sarah. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. And I'm the Vice President for Liberation and Equality at the National Union of Students. So I have a background in kind of student representation, specifically around students from marginalized groups, which, you know, includes women students, of course, but definitely groups that are disproportionately affected by issues of harassment, whether it's, you know, racialized, sexualized, etc.
Perfect, thank you, Sarah. And I think we have Mia back with us.
So
Mia,
sorry about that.
That's no problem at all. Could you just give a brief overview of your role and your involvement in this project?
Yeah, so my name's Mia Nemard, my pronouns are she, her. I'm the outgoing president of the University of Leicester Students' Union, and I am elected as Women's Place on the NUS Liberation Campaign Committee, very wordy. My background tends to be supporting minoritized students through reporting systems, general support with disclosures, formal, informal, that kind of thing. And I've currently been working, of course, with Epigeum, part of Oxford University Press, as a panel member, kind of contributing, scrutinizing areas to make sure that the module for students is accessible, ethical and culturally competent.
Perfect, thanks very much, both. And so if we start with the important questions, what do you think the key challenges facing universities are when it comes to tackling harassment?
This is a big question.
Big one.
I'm comfortable with starting if you want me, if that's okay.
Go ahead, yeah, that's fine.
Cool. Just because I feel like I get this question a lot within my role as well. I mean, for me personally, I think one of the big issues, probably the biggest issue, is the nature of reporting systems. I think that, you know, when it comes to sexual harassment, some campuses, for example, Cambridge, have kind of shifted away from a tribunal style, sort of criminal justice style model towards more trauma-based support, towards believing victims. But across the board, that definitely isn't always the case. I think both in terms of sexual harassment and, you know, hate-based harassment, or however you want to term it, that simply isn't the case. And these tribunal systems, these criminal justice style systems, they, you know, because they place emphasis on, you know, the idea of proving a perpetrator's guilt, of punishing a perpetrator, focus is taken away from the needs of, you know, the victims, for lack of a better word, of harassment, for their trauma-based needs, their mental health needs, their safety needs, etc. So For me, I think one of the fundamental problems is that, and one of the fundamental changes that needs to be made is a shift away from kind of a punitive justice approach to issues of harassment towards a trauma-based, transformative approach towards harassment that actually centers the needs of people who have been harassed.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that's something that came through in developing this programme as well, when we were sort of discussing the issues of reporting and the fact that, you know, the victim's needs need to come first, and that's where we need to operate from. That is the first concern. Did you have anything to add, Mia? A different perspective?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't think it's different, because I completely agree with everything that Sarah said. Kind of stole all my answers there. But yeah, I guess it'd just be to add more in that. Completely agree about trauma-informed work, which I think for a lot of universities at the moment is like revolutionary stuff, and moving away from the penal styles of punishment, retribution, but also universities traditionally have always worked within a very strong legal framework that where the biggest implication would be legal action taken by reported students. So a lot of the time it's disproportionately left survivors feeling the need to not only cope with their trauma, completely relive their trauma, tell their trauma, help people understand their trauma, but then also go through the stages of trying to prove that their trauma actually happened, which is a really hugely invalidating process, and is, although the systems of power are still enacted in very similar ways, there's still such a huge, well, there's partly issues with understanding different types of trauma. So, for example, I don't think, and that's an issue still within UK legal frameworks, understanding racism, what classifies as racism, actually bringing people to justice around that. But people understand what sexual assault and sexual harassment, and there's still no justice for survivors. So it's definitely a double-edged sword, but I think there's so much fear from universities in the wrong direction, not around not supporting students necessarily, but around name and shame legal action for getting something wrong. And even the way that departments traditionally sit within universities, for example, the people that enact the kind of student journey with reporting, it sits with a conduct team, it sits with people that have no experience with well-being, no understanding of trauma, a really heavy pipeline from people that worked in police that go into those services, and expecting to kind of behave the same way, asking students inappropriate questions, hoping almost that they drop off before you reach the end of those stages of panels. It's a huge problem as well. And I think also understanding that people may be well intended, but it doesn't mean that what they're doing is appropriate. So yeah, I've always found that really tricky.
Yeah. So, you know, lots of challenges there, and I think you both have given some really good suggestions as to how universities can take positive steps in that area. And sort of turning to the next question, from your perspective as students, what do you feel the value of co-creation in this area is?
Do you want to start this one?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, mix it up.
Yeah, I guess I feel like it's quite an easy one. Co-creation supports holistic support for students that need support from the university when there isn't co-creation or understanding of how something is enacted, how something is embodied, and what students appropriately need. You miss what the student needs completely, and you perpetuate harmful ideas that for students who are maybe on the brink, don't understand what they need, thinking of engaging, they just won't. And you're always letting down, which always kind of falls down to disproportionately minoritized students.
Yeah. You know, I absolutely agree with that. And the only thing I'd kind of like expand on is, and I feel like we both kind of alluded to this with our answers to the previous questions. I think that both within our universities and of course within wider society, lived experience isn't particularly valued as knowledge or as data. And I think that like a co-creative process, certainly like the one that we engaged with, And certainly in my experience of working on this project, I did feel like my lived experience and my perspective from, not just the lived experience of racism or misogyny or what have you, but also my lived experience as a representative of students, as a student myself, and all of those various things were valued as knowledge and as data in this project. And I think that's a systematic problem within universities and within our education, within wider society. And I think that co-creation, especially the way it was approached in this project, really addresses that issue for sure.
Great, thank you. And that kind of ties us nicely into the next question that I had for you both was, what did you enjoy most about the process of collaborating on this project, tackling harassment?
Okay, I guess that's me again. That's fine.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciated that it didn't feel performative. It didn't, and it was sometimes when, well, one, I think I really appreciated the people that are actually on the panel, because sometimes we'd go through like the content and I'd want to say something. Sarah's already said it. I'm like, this is so much. It's a much nicer experience when there's better nuance and a better range of people that are part of scrutinizing, challenging, and creating content, because I feel like I'm able then to look at the smaller details. And it was also really nice to see like the building of something. Usually I usually get the end results and I end up having to almost complain, or you feel like you haven't been heard or you haven't seen this. So I think it was, I guess I appreciated especially the platform that Epigeum has. And I already had like a very personal experience with some of the courses beforehand when I was supporting student survivors. So for me, it was really good to see that the growth was going in the right direction for me.
Thanks, Mia.
Yeah, very much agree with that. And yeah, I think that, and I feel like Mia can probably relate to this. I think that probably our experience, like particularly as student officers, has often been that, there's kind of a performativity of wanting student engagement. And, when we say things that are, critical, that isn't particularly received, because I think that there's kind of this performative, like, we want to tick the box of having, student engagement, but we don't actually want student voices. And I never felt this way working on this project, because as you both know, I definitely wrote some essay style comments. And it was well received. I felt like I could genuinely say what I was thinking and genuinely be heard, and that feedback be taken into account. As well as, for sure, I didn't feel that pressure because of like the range of kind of the panel to be the person who had to say certain things or represent a certain lived experience. So yeah, and that made me genuinely really enjoy working on it, because I actually felt like I was a part of it.
One last question for you both. What, if any, lessons do you think that universities could learn from this project in particular, or what do you think the key takeaways for them should be?
It's a really good question. Do you have any thoughts, Mia? I'm still formulating.
Yeah, because I guess I wanted to be more helpful than tear down your whole system and start again. But I guess it's how harmful it is to provide services based on an idea of I think what a lot of people strive for is like EDI, a good range of people, and not fully having culturally competent services or understandings, and it infiltrates into every element of student well-being. And I'm not saying it's like the easiest thing to understand nuances beyond your experience, but if you're in those positions, you're getting paid to do that. So unfortunately, I feel like a lot of, especially within HE, is driven by marketization of HE. So it means that really universities often have to be incentivized to do good things. So like I'm working towards the TEF and, you know, hit these diversity inclusion marks, and then you'll be a better university marketed in that way, which it shouldn't be that way. And also understanding, I guess, that minority students are just minoritized. They're not like a small group. They're not an invalid group. I think there's some kind of understanding over that, but I think for a lot of universities, the opinion is still that it's an extra amount of work versus cultural competency that benefits everyone. So I think that's my standout bit.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point as well around like the fact that students are minoritized, because, you know, there are like various campuses that, you know, do have like a majority of, say, students of color, right? But that, I mean, that kind of reveals the flaw of like an exclusive focus on diversity logic, because students of color on a majority, even if they're the majority population on their campus, they still face racism, right? They face institutional racism. So those students might not be minoritized in that context, but they are marginalized. They are like oppressed. But I guess in terms of suggestions for universities, like practical suggestions, like Mia said, it's difficult to really imagine. I guess because the first instinct is like, okay, a marketized education system and the logic that it works on is never going to be in the interest of students. But within what we have, like certainly what we said kind of around reporting systems, I think that from learning from this project in particular, the practices of kind of like co-creation that this project like did, I think is something that universities could learn from if they genuinely care about like student co-creation. You know, if I'm gonna stop being cynical for a second. And yeah. No, I think that, yeah, within the context that we have, I think those would be my main things. But it ultimately, it's difficult to imagine beyond marketization.
Yeah, I agree, but I do think there's definitely space to understand the amount of, I don't like using the word talent because it's still kind of marketization-y, but the amount of people that have been involved in reforming services and the movement come from the student movement. So continue to pay these people when they're left. They don't have to be students anymore. They still have the competency to understand and inform and actually change these services. It's fine if the knowledge within university systems is limited, but then have someone come in that knows and can support. And you won't always get that just by doing, you know, internal recruitment.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think you've both made some really good points there, and there's some really practical suggestions that universities can sort of take away and build on, and let's hope that they do. And so I guess just to sort of wrap up, I just wanted to thank you both for your time today, but also throughout the project, because as I've said to you both before, it really wouldn't be what it is without all of that constructive feedback that we had, and I really do value your input on the project throughout. So thank you both for your time, and thanks for being a part of this session today.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, just a reminder that if you want to find out more about tackling harassment, please visit our website and request a free trial. I also wanted to flag that our next programme, which may be of interest to this group, is our International Student Success Programme. And again, there's lots more information about that on our website. Thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of you in this wonderful conference.